Okay, since I had my watercolors out, I'm going to do something a little different. I also thought since Christmas was coming up, if anybody wanted to make any kind of cards, little splashes, here's just a basic layout with some text. What I'm going to do is a birthday card for my mom. Unfortunately for me, I only have a few days to do this, and I want to try and get it done in time. Now, this is just a gardenia. I'm just going to do a loose little wash. This is a 11 by 15 piece of Arches cold press, 140 pound. And what I did was I folded it in half and I put the watermark of the Arches down here in the lower right hand corner. I thought that would be a little bit more, but we'll get to the inside of the card later. But right now the outside front cover is going to have this gardenia on. The reference is up in the upper left hand corner. I went ahead and drew out the 96. Now what I'm going to do is do some splashy washes of greens, real light blues, real light cobalt violets for the white, real light to keep it white, and then some splashy background, make it a little bit darker just so we could show off that white up against the darker background. Then once I'm done, I'm going to paint in the 96th with just real deep colors, probably even like a neutral tint that I have. It is her 96th birthday. She means the world to me. I'm going to go ahead and try and put this card together for her. Let's get started. Okay, let's start off with the game plan. What I'm going to do is mostly speed painting to get this done. But what I do want to show you was my picture was just the flower in a little small glass with water in it, and I took the photograph outside. So I am going to put some cerulean blue in the highlights that's reflecting the sky, because those leaves are very glossy and they do reflect. So just to stay with what we have in our photo reference, I'm going to go ahead and do some real light washes of cerulean blue first, maybe a little wee bit of cobalt blue, but I'll mix up the blues a little bit and then start with my greens. And then I'm going to give probably like a quinacridone gold and maybe a raw sienna, real light around the edges of some of the leaves. And then I'll go with the blues towards the center where the shadows are. Then we'll do a splashy background and then the 96, and that's it. But I'm going to take off to start to do it, and we're going to keep going until we get it done. Let's get started. Okay, right now I'm just putting in the washes of the cerulean blue and quinacridone gold and maybe a little bit of cadmium yellow deep. I'll obviously start with all my real light colors first. Those will be the ones that will pretty much stay the way they are. And then this way I'll just keep taking darker colors over them more and more. What I'm trying to do is set my pace for where all the lighter areas of the entire painting will be. In other words, each individual leaf has different shadings between the veins, but then the overall leaf itself may have a shape. Is it bending down? Is it bending up? Is it in the light? Is it in the shadows? Each one of them is different, and you could tell how much it's going to reflect. Now, some of it I may change just for the sense of the artistic license, but that is as I go. I like to see things how they develop with watercolors because things change quite a bit. As the colors dry, a lot of it depends on how much water and how much paint you have to the brush. If you have a lot of paint and very little water, they may not change very much at all. But the more you wet everything down, the more they'll lighten up as they dry. Now keep in mind, I'm also trying to keep tabs on the leaves themselves. In other words, the younger leaves are more glossy and more of a yellowish green, where the older leaves start to get a little bit more dull. And then I also start to add more of the Winsor blue and Winsor green, which are pretty much the phthalo colors that give it that snappier, deepish green. Whereas the young leaves are more supple, smaller, and they also have a little bit different vein patterns since they're just starting to grow.
These are the kind of things I like to try and keep track of as I paint to make sure I know what leaves are what, and then to duplicate my reference. Because keep in mind, if I'm working from a photograph, that is all the information I'm looking for. What is what? Since I take my own photographs, this is very important to follow. It's no different than painting from the actual plant in a way. Working from an actual plant is by far better than a photograph, but that is only because there are a lot of things that could go wrong with photographing something and working from a photograph. You could have color shifts, distortion, and also even improper lighting that may cause some colors to go darker or lighter than they really are. Remember, in transparent watercolors, we could always go darker. That I cannot stress enough. But to try and put lighter colors back over dark, it just doesn't work. They do not cover, hence the name, transparent watercolors. Now I'm just finishing up the leaves. I'll get to a certain point and look back and see what I have, just to see how dark my darkest areas are, because that will be my guideline that I cannot take anything darker than that. Let's take a look.
Okay, we're pretty well done with the flower and the leaves. I could go back in and change them around a little bit, make them a little bit darker. Maybe this right in here, and then this little guy right here, I could do that. But the background, I could also go back in. I might try and get a little bit more splashy edges like this. All I have to do is take real thin light washes and just dry brush them here and there, and I'll get my scratchy edges. I kind of like that effect. That's, to me, the true meaning of transparent watercolors, where you start to get that layered effect, and that is something that really tells you that it's been layered. And then down here, I'm going to have to stop because I'm going to use an ink to fill in my letters and numbers. But what I'm going with is, these are the 4 colors I have with the Iroshizuku ink. It's by Pilot. I'm going to go with the Kurosami. Some of these I'm not going to bother pronouncing because I'd hack them up anyway. But the Kurosami is kind of like a little wee bit of a purplish black, but it's a little bit lighter, so it's not a pure black like the Takasumi. My opinion, that would be too dark, too black. It would be like traditional text, but I don't know if I wanted that, since this is all a painting anyway. I don't really have to make it a laid out illustration ready for print. The Yamaguri is a little bit too brownish, and then the other one that I'm not going to pronounce is a little bit too light, and I was concerned about that one, that if I try and paint around the edges, if I would run into 2 coats some places, 1 coat another place. So in other words, I might get overlap marks with this lighter color. So I'm going to go with that one. And I already tried just kind of a practice fill-in of what it would be like painting it in. So that's what I'm going to do with this one. So it's dark enough that it'll cover nice, but light enough that it won't be the pure black as a Takasumi. Now, I would have liked to have even made it into the cadmium yellow deep, like right here, but you can see how nice and clean it is up against the white. But if I put it up against other colors, then what will happen is it's really going to start leaving that background color bleed through. So now that I already did not protect the paper, I am a little bit jumpy of trying to put yellow over that, and I think my patterns are going to come through, and I don't want that either. So the problem was, from the start, I didn't know how good of a line I could get, how clean of a line I could get with the thicker, gooier Frisket. So I passed on that too, and I just decided to paint it in after the fact with a darker color, and then just make it the ink, and that's it. And I like to use the ink only because it's already a pre-mixed value, and I can work it straight from the bottle rather than trying to mix a color of a watercolor really nice and clean, so it doesn't vary at all in value. I'm going to go ahead and take this tape off when I start, and then I'm going to move it around and tape it down semi-temporarily, just to give my maximum angles of whatever part of these letters and numbers I'm going to be working with, because I'm not going to try and fill it in the way it is now. And then I'm also going to use an older sable brush that kind of lost its point. This way the rounded tip will be much better to get down in these edges and ends of the rounded parts of the letters versus trying to fill it in with a real strong needle sharp point. Would be pretty tough to kind of drag it around that edge. A filbert might work too, but I'm going to stay away from that because the filbert itself a little bit too short. I like a little bit more of a floppier brush for this, so I could put a little bit more water in it, in this case ink, and then that way hopefully it'll flow better and give me a nice clean straight edge, and we could put this numbers and letters complete, and that will be pretty much all for the front of our card, and that is it. Let's go ahead and take this off and move it around and see if we can fill in these numbers. So this is going to be a challenge. Let's go. In my opinion, this is the most critical part of this particular painting. Trying to keep the edges ultra crisp and straight, also trying to concentrate on the thickness and thinness of this particular type of font. It is a challenge any way I look at it. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I darkened the top of the 6 just a little bit, and I will go back over with an electric eraser and take out my pencil lines where I had the tape. Now, I like to use an electric eraser because I'm not scrubbing all over the place. I'm just in a real fine area, and I use the vinyl erasers that work really well. Made it through the 96. If you want to test your nerves, that would be a good way to do it. I don't know if I have nerves like I used to. We used to have a type class in school where we would have to actually take what was called a Spec type book, and it was just a big binder with real big letters in it of all kind of different fonts that we would have to literally trace it out and then ink it in as perfect as we possibly could to make it almost look like it was pretty much machine made. But that definitely got you to concentrate on your lines and where you're at and what you're doing. A brush is a little bit harder in my opinion, but the rapidographs we used to use were okay, but that was also on smooth illustration board where the little tooth of the cold pressed watercolor paper is a little bit more of a challenge to make a nice perfect straight line. You might start picking up the tooth of the paper if you don't have enough water or ink on your brush, or if you try to just skim over it with an ink pen, it'll start to skip a little bit and it'll give you a ragged edge. One that you could notice anyway. But this one, I'm gonna leave it there just like that. I don't want to press my luck anymore, and I may go back in and do a little bit more splashes. But okay, right now I am going to go back in and make the background a little bit darker. The reason why is if we use our photo as a working thumbnail, I could see how the flower jumps out at me more up against the darker leaves and even just the sidewalk itself. I just set it on a sidewalk to take the picture. So what that means is right now my flower is roughly the same values as the background, and I see 96 TH and leaves more than anything else. Well, I want to see the flower first and foremost along with the 96. So if I make my background darker, hopefully what I'm thinking is the background will start to blend into the leaves a little bit more and it'll subdue them, but then it'll also bring out my flower more because I'll have a light up against dark and dark up against light. So it'll be reversed. Hopefully you'll be able to see everything all at once. I'm going to go ahead and sketchy in the background just like up in here, little splashy backgrounds. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it a little bit at a time and I'm going to leave them dry really good. But I got to stay away from this down here only because my ink will definitely run. In fact, what I might do is just tape it off and then just only work up in here just to protect that down here. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, I went ahead and taped everything off, just very lightly stuck to it. I'm going to just work up in here. If I even make some of these areas in here darker and then feather it out to what's already there, then that will hopefully bring the flower out more. But I'll use the same Cobalt blue, cobalt violet. I don't know if I'll really introduce any new colors to it. Maybe a little bit of gray, just to break it up a little bit. But I'm just mixing up the colors, making sure they're well mixed so I get a nice even layer, if I want a nice even layer. If I don't, then I just add more. But I will take it again, a little bit at a time, and that will really build up the layers. Flour out a little bit more. Sometimes it's hard to be spontaneous without it looking like you were trying to be spontaneous. Once I remove the tape, I could get down in closer to the letters, but for the most of the washes, I'll leave the tape on. I'm using a small brush too, only because I'll get tighter patterns, which is something I want in a smaller area, but then also I can't hold much water on the brush at all, so I don't royally puddle it out and cause myself a mess. But that's just me. You do however you need to do. I'm just trying to watch my shapes as I paint, leave some straight edges behind. Sometimes it's just as important what you don't paint as it is what you do paint. And I'll leave this dry really good and try at least one more. Oddly enough, that cobalt violet settles down pretty quick, and I have to keep mixing it pretty good just to keep it from settling on the bottom. I have to watch my daylight coming through between the leaf and the background, because if I don't, then that might become a part of my composition. If you want it, that's great. If you don't, then you gotta watch. Okay, that's, I think, starting to help already. One or two more coats, but then I like the splashiness. A lot of texture, a lot going on, but very subtle. We'll wait till that dries really well so it doesn't just keep on mixing, and then I'll start losing my hard edges, and then we'll go back with at least one more coat. Okay, I'm going to get a little bit more intense this time. Mix my blues and purples a little bit stronger. Once we mix it up here, maybe I'll put some gray in or just something different. My violet is starting to get a little bit blue anyway from taking a blue brush into it. And now we're ready to go. And I could control the wash a little bit better if it's not real intense. Not to mention I'll cover up everything that I already made if I want to make nice subtle shapes and squigglies. I'll destroy them and cover them up completely if I go real dark. And since I'm watching where I'm wetting at, I could take deeper colors where I want to back in, and I know it's going to stop where the water stops, right at the edge of my flower. And that'll help too. And again, it's on a slight grade, about a 25 to 30% angle. Okay, I'll let that dry, but right now I think I might change the exposure, believe it or not, on my camera, because it's a lot darker on the paper than it is on my video. So we're going to try and adjust that just so we can see the actual values of the painting itself. Let's let that dry really good, and we might give it one more coat. Okay, I dropped it down 2/3 of a stop, and that really brought out the blues and purples in the background. It was a little bit washed out before. Right now, I am going to take my pencil line off. We'll do that speed erasing. As soon as I get my tape off, carefully. If I never mentioned in the past, this is just regular frog tape that's used for painting, interior house painting. Okay, just like in the old drafting days. The 96, I'm going to leave it the way it is. The real subtle textures of the splashes in the background. The little brush helped me do that. And the dark blues and purples now really add to the flower. But they're also kind of like color coordinated. And then I left it end at the 96. So now I have dark against light, light against dark. I'm going to leave that there. Let's move on and do the inside. Okay, again, here's our painted card this time. It's an actual painting, and I say actual because I'll show you a lot of the ones I've done previously, but what they are is all digital. Here's a stack of them, probably from the last 5 or 6 years, all Mother's Day and birthday cards that I made for my mom. These here are just, this one is a hibiscus. I went ahead and cut it out, but then added some, just some freehand things just to add a little bit of tidbit stuff here and there. And then some of these, what I would do is go and find some of her favorite pictures or even the photos that she may have even forgotten about that I dug up out of the old photo albums and make copies of them and then put different ones on. Here's an old picture of our family back in 1962. That's me, by the way. My brother, my mom, my dad, and just photos that you could really make something personal. Now, some of these are photographs of my own, but I went ahead and made a watercolor effect out of it. Back in Photoshop days, it was known as an action. I use Affinity Photo 2 now, and it's known as a macro. In a nutshell, all I will do is take my own photos, duplicate it 3 or 4 times, and then off-shift the layers a little bit, and then apply different blending modes to each layer, and you'll start to soften things up, destroy edges, take one original photo and find the edges of it, and then apply a pen and ink filter to that. You could do a lot of different things to really make it look like a watercolor, even with a little bit of ink accents, but that's all digital. And then in some cases, I'll even take, like this one here, different types of images, and then even again the same thing. It's just a photograph, and once I will get the photograph done pretty much where I want, I'll even slide in a watercolor pattern of just splotches, whether it be digital or original transparent watercolors, and then put blending modes to it, and it'll add the splotches here and there just to make it look like, instead of it being just a solid white area, it'll have a little bit of splotches to make it look like it was a splashed traditional watercolor. But again, these are all digital. So taking some of your favorite photos, making them into paintings, or just taking some favorite family photos for somebody, then that could really make a card personal. And it's just something you can't buy at a store when you're really taking things that are important to somebody, putting it in a card, and that is a card they could cherish for the rest of their life. Now this one, I'm going to leave her do whatever she wants with it. In other words, I'll make the inset, and she may want it glued in place, but she's already talking about how she wants this frame. So if I do frame it and put it under glass, I won't need to open it or make a card out of it. I'll just put mat board over it, put it under glass, and leave it just like that. And if that's what she wants, that's what she's going to get. Let's go over to the computer and see how we can make our inset. Okay, here's what my final design is going to be. All I did was just print out happy birthday to a very special mother. And again, this one, she is okaying everything. So if she's okay with this, then I'll go ahead and glue it in. Now this one in particular, what I'll do is just print it off as it is. This is just a photograph, oddly enough, of a
cobalt violet colored hydrangea and a cobalt blue hydrangea that were together that I already had a photograph of, and I just applied a mask over it and kind of just softened out and whited out the top of the photo. So this way, on the insert, I have a painting on the bottom and text on the top, and the front cover, it's just the exact opposite. I have a painting on the top and text on the bottom. Well, I'm going to go ahead and print this out, and we'll go back to the drawing board and see how it comes out. Okay, here's our painted front cover, 96th. I kept it fairly simple and plain only because I didn't want to get into a whole bunch of hand-colored text. It is just tough to keep perfect straight edges because anybody could tell something's wrong if it's not a perfect straight edge. Here is our insert. And here it is printed out, just again on regular type paper. And what I would do is if she decides that she wants it, then I'll just run a strip of tape down here. It's just a double-edged tape that used for holding mat board together, such as that. And then I will just stick it right here and center it up when I'm ready to go. And then it would just stay there as an insert. And then you'd be able to open it up like that, and that would be it. So this is the card I'm going to give her. She really likes it so far, and I couldn't be happier. There's multiple coats of real light values, and that's what really gives the subtle textures and complexity of the background. And it did work better that when we darkened the background, it brought the whitish flower out more. So I'm going to go with that. Now, if you ever want to try a custom card for somebody that you may know and really care about, this may be really the way to go, that you could really put some different things inside the card. You could really include anything in the card that they would be really familiar with or really enjoy. That is something that you cannot buy as the way you could custom make it for one particular person. Our card is done, our insert's done. We'll get the green light to either tape it in or leave it as is. And with that all said, we'll call this one finished until I see you out in the field or back at the studio. Thanks for watching. Happy birthday, Mom.